This episode of The Lew Rockwell Show is sponsored by...
Is the growth of government driving you crazy? Is it frustrating you that you can't do anything about it? Now you can. Join the Free State Project. Move to New Hampshire and get active with other liberty activists who have already slowed the growth of government in New Hampshire. Go to freestateproject.org.
This is The Lew Rockwell Show.
It's great to have as our guest this morning Dr. Tom Woods. Tom is Senior Fellow in American History at the Mises Institute. He's the author of 8 books and really now 9 books. And today, Tom, I want to talk to you about your newest book, which is all too timely. It's called Meltdown, a free market look at why the stock market collapsed, the economy tanked, and government bailouts will make things worse. So, Tom, here we are in the middle of this horrible economic episode, not only in our own country, but in the whole world. And some people are saying that we weren't Keynesian enough, that we need more Keynesianism, we need more government spending, more money creation, more regulation, more of everything that the state blesses us with. You take a different approach.
Well, I do take rather a different approach. That's right, Lou. It seemed to me that in the midst of a crisis of this magnitude that, you know, my being the ever optimist, I always want to try to find some kind of silver lining in it. And it seems to me the silver lining is that we might be able to, emerge from it with people more knowledgeable about our point of view and people less likely to fall for the claim that the free market did this. Yeah, right. Yeah, like the Federal Reserve System is part of the free market. You know, it's just an unbelievable libel that's being spread. But yes, of course, that's the diagnosis, that we haven't had enough Keynesianism, we haven't had enough spending and all the rest of it. But, you know, the answer to that is twofold. I mean, one could go into a theoretical exposition of why Keynesianism is all wrong, and our people have done that. In fact, there's a whole book that was produced, from what I understand, out of the Mises Institute's 1989 conference on Keynes, and you can find that book on the Mises Institute site. But you can also, just for the layman, you know, who just is searching for answers and doesn't have much theoretical background, you can simply point out, first of all, the fact is that starting in 2001, we had this mad money creation spree for the precise reason that we were told in 2001 that what we need is more money creation, more this and that, to get out of the hole of 2000-2001 in the wake of the dot-com bust. So we were told that the way out of that one was more money creation and so on. Well, what more money creation, of course, has done, creating money out of thin air doesn't actually give the economy any more resources than it has. So all it can do is set the economy on an unsustainable investment path. The low interest rates that result artificially from this pumping in of additional money simply encourages investors to make investment decisions that, from the point of view of the economy as a whole and the resources that have been saved, can't be sustained. And so it, in effect, encourages a phony boom. Well, so in other words, what caused the situation we're in now was precisely the advice we're being told to follow now. Whereas if we had let the economy just bottom out in 2001, if we had let that recession run its course, well, we wouldn't have had this ongoing housing bubble, because, you know, it's not a coincidence that it's right around 2001 that the myths of the housing bubble really began to spread. The idea that, houses never go down in value, they're the best investment you can make, you can flip houses for a living. Well, why do those myths take hold? Partly because this is the first, 2000-2001 is the first recession on record in which new housing starts did not decline. And that's largely because all this artificial money's being pumped in. So that gives people this false impression that, well, everything else may fall, but housing never does. So by postponing the downturn in effect of 2001, we gave ourselves this worse one. So if we try to postpone this one, it's simply going to get all the worse. And then secondly, again, I hesitate to use all these empirical examples, but, you know, Japan did follow all this advice. I mean, Paul Krugman's protestations to the contrary notwithstanding, they followed every bit of this advice. You know, they nationalized part of their banking industry, they spent trillions of yen on public works projects, they dropped interest rates down to zero, they flooded the economy with money. I mean, they propped up zombie companies, they had a bailout fund for rotten companies. And, you know, what did it do? I mean, they're still down overwhelmingly from where they were 18 years ago, and yet the same thing is being being proposed to us today, by and large, by the same people. It really goes to show, Murray's rule was right. Rothbard's law that nobody ever resigns. I can't. Not only has Krugman not resigned, he's writing for the New York Times.
Well, it's quite astounding when you think. Well, it seems to me one only has to stop and think for a moment that if spending every dime you can possibly get your hands on, and money creation, if these are the path to prosperity, how come the whole world isn't prosperous?
Well,
how come, Zimbabwe isn't living it up and all doing very well?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we would have found anytime you hear this type of solution whereby, the economy can be restored to health in the absence of the creation of real stuff, that the idea that we can just restore the economy to health either with labor unions or minimum wage laws or additional money creation, well, then again, you have to answer the question, why doesn't Bangladesh just do that? Why has it actually required an awful lot of effort and saving and capital accumulation in the past to raise people to a condition of civilized life? And so therefore, why wouldn't that be the path we need to take today?
Somebody wrote me and told me about an ad that they'd heard on a radio station where a dad is explaining to his daughter that even though she's a wonderful little girl, she's helping keep the economy in crisis by keeping all her money in her piggy bank. And that she needs to spend that money because, for example, if she buys a toy, then the toy store owner is doing better. He can do, his employees will do better, and really the whole economy will do better. And so everybody needs to spend every dime in their piggy bank. But again, I guess because we have such a subservient media to the state, and the academic world, with the exception of a few heroic people like you, Tom, are all going along with this sort of thing, with the Keynesian prescriptions and the old Keynesian nostrums, no matter how discredited they are, that people seem to think that the most unbelievable baloney coming out of Washington makes sense.
And of course, when you think about it, I mean, what exactly, in part, got us into this mess? It's that people bought too much house. They were sort of misled into buying more house than they should have bought. And because house prices seem to be forever appreciating, well, then they used the built-up equity in their homes to buy still more stuff. And now that reality is hitting them, and they now realize that if they had known what the value of their house, what its trajectory was likely to be in the future, they wouldn't have consumed as much as they had. Now they're retrenching, and that makes perfect sense because in effect what they've done is they've borrowed too much and consumed too much. So to give them the advice that consuming still more will solve the problem, it's really just staggering in its absurdity. But needless to say, this is the conventional wisdom, and it's because of the prevalence of ideas like this that we can be thankful that in this day and age, at least, we have the internet, so that places like the Mises Institute and LewRockwell.com can spread the real message, so that people who are skeptical of what they're being fed have some kind of intellectual meat, something they can really chew on. And I'm happy to point out, Lou, this is entirely spontaneous. Nobody asked me to give this testimonial, but I am grateful in my own life that in 1993 I went to the Mises University program, which is the Mises Institute's week-long summer program for students. And I had never been exposed to these ideas before. I barely knew who Rothbard was. I more or less knew who Mises was. But, a lot of the think tanks who liberally invoke the names Mises and Hayek consistently shy away from their more politically incorrect positions, particularly their opposition to the central bank. But yet, today, that's the most important thing they can teach us, is the opposition to the central bank, the explanation as to what causes the business cycle. And I got this foundation then, and I've been hooked since. And in fact, it would not have been possible for me to write this book if I had not had that foundation and that encouragement to learn in this tradition that I got from Mises University. Because for a book like this, the idea behind it for me was that I've got to get a book on this subject out quickly, because every crank and lunatic and basically, hungover Keynesian is going to have a book coming out by the summertime. I got to rush something out so that the Austrians, in effect, have, more or less the first word on this, so that at least it's slightly harder for the blockheads in the media to pretend that the free market caused this. I want to give a good, easy to understand overview as to why that's not right, and why in fact it's the interference with the market that has led us into this terrible mess. So I'm very grateful to you and the Institute for making this possible.
Tom,